Dr. Scott Power is one of the Bureau of Meteorology's senior research scientists and the coordinating lead author of the IPCC's chapter on the near-term effects of climate change. He joins us now from Stockholm on the phone. Dr. Power, many thanks for joining us on The World. Now, there's a lot of information in this fifth assessment. It says it's extremely likely humans are the dominant cause of observed warming. Why such language?
Because there are several lines of evidence that have built up in the peer-reviewed scientific literature, and if you take all of that evidence into account, you find that the confidence is at that high level.
So, with the substantial and sustained reductions of greenhouse gas emissions that would be necessary to prevent further warming and climate change, how does that happen in a country like Australia, particularly as the federal government talks about dismantling the carbon tax?
Well, this report's about the science of climate change. So we've examined how temperatures and how have changed, how sea level changed, and what the projections are for various things, including temperature and sea level. And so what we can show using the latest generation of climate models is that if you put in plausible scenarios for what might occur with our greenhouse gas emissions, you end up with very substantial temperature rises, very substantial sea level increases. And the only way that the models that are used in many, many different centres around the world are moderated in those projections is if the global emissions of greenhouse gases are substantially reduced and in a sustained fashion.
Can you summarise for us what the report said about sea levels and also the issue of the acidity of the oceans?
Yeah, well, the report points out that in the observations we've already seen an increase in global temperature of 0.85 degrees Celsius from 1880 through to 2012, and the increase in sea level rise has been approximately 19 centimetres since 1901. And the other notable change that we've seen, many of these changes are unprecedented for either decades or much, much longer. One is the increase in atmospheric concentrations of CO2, and we've seen levels higher currently than have been around in the atmosphere for at least 800,000 years. And if you look at the time series of CO2 over that long, long period, it meanders around for hundreds of thousands of years, but then when you hit the Industrial Revolution, it shoots up, and it's continuing to shoot up to, as I said, these unprecedentedly high levels. And if you look at global temperature, it too has reached its highest value, highest decadal value in the 21st century. And just a little bit of, some of your viewers may be aware of the fact that Australia just experienced its warmest 12-month period on record, ending on August the 31st, and it turns out that we're very well on track to having the highest ever temperature recorded in Australia this September. So if that's the way things unfold, we'll have a new high record for Australia. So the warming is continuing in Australia as it is around the world.
So the takeout from this latest report is that the science is there. It's been building up and giving us more proof as the years go by. What do scientists say we are supposed to do about this? Is it a choice between winding back the clock or adapting to a hotter climate? In this first report, this concentrates on the science, and the IPCC process doesn't prescribe what the world should do. That's up to individuals, and that's up to governments and others. So what we do is we say, here are the choices. If you make this choice, this is what could happen. So we look at various scenarios for future greenhouse gas emissions, and we show that if CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions continue at the sorts of rates that they've been that have occurred in recent times, then warming gets very high. Whereas if those emissions are curbed dramatically, or substantially, I should say, for a sustained period, then the projected changes are much smaller. So we don't
it's up to other people to decide what they do with that information.
Did 100% of the scientists advising the IPCC agree with the findings?
The IPCC process is built on a thorough assessment of the peer-reviewed scientific literature. And as with any pieces of opinion, you'll get a variety of views amongst a collection of people. But this is a consensus view. So all of the scientists that have been involved have put their name on this report. So what you'll find typically is maybe someone thought it was slightly more. A figure might have been slightly higher, or a figure might have been slightly less. But these are all figures that we're comfortable with, and the broad messages are very clear. You know, some of the details, some of these fine details might vary from one individual to another, but the broad picture is very clear. You know, the world's warmed up, sea level's risen, further warming, further sea level rise appears inevitable, and the only way we're going to be able to curb those future changes is if there are reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions.
Dr. Scott Power, speaking to us from Stockholm, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Jane.